The January wind cut through the barracks like a blade through rotted cloth. David Stein pressed his skeletal frame against the wooden planks, feeling the splinters dig into his ribs. Pain so familiar now it had become a kind of companion. Around him, men who were barely men anymore huddled together, their breath forming clouds that rose and disappeared into the darkness above. The smell never left. Smoke from the chimneys that never stopped burning. Human waste frozen in the latrines. Fear, sharp and metallic, like blood on the tongue. The searchlights swept across the yard in their endless rotation, cutting through the fog with mechanical precision, illuminating nothing but the barbed wire and the guard towers where men with machine guns waited for someone to give them a reason. David's eyes, once brown and warm, now hollow as burnt-out windows, fixed on the man beside him. Abraham was older, perhaps 50, though the camp had aged him beyond counting. His hands trembled constantly now, even when he slept. "Tonight," David whispered, the word barely more than breath. Abraham's trembling stopped. He turned his head slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter him. "You'll die. I'm already dead. We all are. The only question is whether I die running or die waiting. The wire, the dogs, the guards. I know." David reached into the lining of his striped uniform and pulled out something wrapped in a scrap of cloth. A photograph, creased and stained, of a woman and a small boy, his wife, his son, taken 2 years ago in another life. "I have to try, for them. And if I make it—" He pressed the photograph into Abraham's shaking hands. "I will come back for you. I swear it." Abraham looked at the photograph, at the faces of people he would never meet, and closed his fingers around it. "Go with God, David." There was no God here. David had stopped looking for him months ago, but he nodded anyway. The alarm klaxons would sound the moment they noticed. David had watched the patterns of the searchlights for weeks, counting the seconds between sweeps, memorizing the blind spots near the eastern fence where the ground sloped down toward the forest. 7 seconds. That was all he had. He moved during the shift change at midnight, when the guards were tired and distracted. He crawled on his belly through the frozen mud, every movement deliberate, his breath held until his lungs screamed. The barbed wire loomed above him, 3 meters of twisted steel crowned with razors. Behind him, a shout, then another. The sirens began to wail. David didn't look back. He pulled himself forward with his elbows, feeling the wire tear into his shoulders as he squeezed beneath the lowest strand. Blood ran warm down his arms, shocking against the cold. The dogs barked, close, too close, their snarls mixing with the crack of rifle fire. He rolled into a drainage ditch filled with frozen waste and corpses left from a transport 3 days earlier. The smell was beyond description. He pressed himself between 2 bodies, forcing himself not to breathe, not to move, as the searchlights passed overhead and the dogs sniffed at the edge of the ditch. A voice in German, "Nothing here but dead Jews." Another voice, "Check the forest." Boots squelched away through the mud. The lights moved on. David waited until the dawn began to gray the eastern sky. Then he crawled out from among the dead, covered in filth and blood, and ran. He ran until his legs gave out. He ran until he couldn't hear the sirens anymore. He ran until the forest swallowed him whole. At the edge of a frozen stream, he collapsed. And as consciousness left him, he looked back toward where the camp lay hidden beyond the trees. Smoke still rose from its chimneys, dark against the morning light. "I will come back," he promised the smoke. "I will come back for all of you." 8 months later, somewhere in France, Private David Stein of the British Army's Jewish Brigade sat by a campfire, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. The weapon was an extension of him now, every part memorized, every function second nature. Around him, other soldiers laughed and shared cigarettes, their faces young and unmarked by what he had seen. He had told them nothing. When they asked where he was from, he said Poland. When they asked about his family, he said gone. They didn't push. The war had taught everyone the value of silence. But at night, when the others slept, David would take out the piece of metal he'd carved in training. A dog tag with no official number, just a name scratched into the steel. Abraham. He would hold it and remember the promise he'd made in the darkness of the barracks. Every battle he fought, every Nazi soldier who fell before his rifle, brought him one step closer to keeping that promise. His sergeant, a Welshman named Davies, sat down beside him. "You're different from the others, Stein. They fight because they have to. You fight like you're looking for something." David didn't look up from his rifle. "I am." "What?" "A way back." Davies studied him for a long moment, then nodded and stood. "We're moving east tomorrow, deep into Germany. Rumor is we'll be liberating some of the camps." David's hands stopped moving. His heart, which had learned to beat steady through artillery fire and machine gun spray, suddenly hammered against his ribs. "Which camps?" "Don't know yet. Command will brief us at dawn." After Davies walked away, David sat staring into the fire. The flames danced and writhed, and in them he saw the smoke from the chimneys. He saw Abraham's trembling hands. He saw the searchlights cutting through the fog. "Hold on," he thought. "I'm coming." April 1945. The convoy rolled through devastated German countryside, past burned-out villages and abandoned Wehrmacht positions. David sat in the back of a truck, watching the landscape roll by, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew this terrain, the way the road curved, the distant line of trees. When they crested the hill and he saw the guard towers rising against the gray sky, he knew. "Stop the truck," he said. The driver glanced back. "What?" "Stop the truck." David was already moving, jumping down before the vehicle had fully halted. He walked forward, ignoring the shouts of his commanding officer, his eyes fixed on the gates ahead. The camp looked smaller than he remembered. The wire seemed less imposing. The towers silent now, their machine guns pointing at nothing. But the smell, that smell of smoke and death and despair, that was the same. Allied tanks had already breached the main gate, the metal twisted and hanging from its hinges. David walked through, his rifle in his hands but forgotten. Around him, other soldiers moved with stunned faces, seeing for the first time what he had lived through. Some vomited, some wept, some stood frozen, unable to process what lay before them. The prisoners emerged slowly, like ghosts manifesting from fog. Skeletal figures in striped uniforms, blinking in the daylight, unable to believe that the guards were gone, that the gates were open, that they were free. David moved among them, searching. His eyes swept across face after face, looking for one he recognized. Most were too far gone, their features erased by starvation. Others stared at him with empty eyes that had seen too much. Then, in front of the barracks where he had once slept, he saw a man sitting against the wall, older than the others, hands trembling, and in those hands, clutched like a talisman, a photograph creased and stained, of a woman and a small boy. "Abraham." The old man looked up slowly. His eyes, clouded with cataracts and despair, struggled to focus. Then they widened. "David." David fell to his knees beside him, his rifle clattering to the ground. He pulled Abraham into his arms, feeling how light the old man had become, how fragile. "I told you," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time since his escape. "I told you I would come back." Abraham's trembling hands came up to grip David's uniform. "You came back," he repeated, as if testing the words, as if they might dissolve into another hallucination. "You came back. I'm here. We're here. It's over, Abraham. It's over." Around them, other soldiers had begun distributing food and water, calling for medics, opening the locked barracks to free those who were too weak to walk. The sound of tank engines mixed with weeping of joy, of grief, of relief too profound for words. The sun was setting when David finally stood. He had spent hours helping carry survivors to the medical tents, identifying the dead, speaking names that needed to be remembered. His uniform was stained with blood and filth and tears, both his own and others. He walked back to the gate alone, removed his helmet, and knelt in the mud where he had once crawled to escape. Behind him, the camp stretched out, no longer a place of death, but not yet a place of life. Something in between. Something that would take years, generations perhaps, to understand. The piece of metal with Abraham's name carved into it was in his hand. He pressed it to his lips, then placed it on the ground beside the gate. A marker. Promise kept. I came back, he whispered to the evening air, to the ghosts of those who hadn't survived to see this day, to the man he had been who had crawled through corpses to escape. I told you I'd come back. In the distance, a church bell began to ring, the first time its voice had been heard since the Germans came. The sound carried across the fields, pure and clear, and for just a moment in that sound, there was something that felt like hope. David,